So if you're a young man watching this, here are 9 hard lessons life is going to teach you, one way or another. I'm starting with this one because I know how you young men think. First of all, I would say you have to be a good man. Like attracts like. So if you work on yourself and become the kind of person that a woman is going to be attracted to, that's the first thing. My second thing is put yourself in play. One of the greatest things I ever did was take ballroom dancing lessons. And when I was in Washington, D.C., I took ballroom dancing lessons. I showed up there and it was group lessons and there was like 100 girls and 5 guys. I put myself in play. I actually ended up, there was like 10 of my friends ended up going with me. It was such a great way to meet women. So you put yourself in play, and then you have to have the courage. I will never forget that I was at a wedding, and I was dancing with my young cousin's girlfriend, who happened to be at the wedding, and she was only like 15 years old, and I'm dancing with her, and I was like 25 or something, and I thought I was being a smart ass, and I said, so tell me, I said, what line's really what's the best line a man can use on a girl? And I thought I was going to fluster her. She wasn't flustered a bit. She leaned back, looked up, and said, it isn't the line the man says. It's the fact that he has the guts to say it. What attracts women more than anything else is confidence. It's not looks. It's not even necessarily money and power. It's confidence. And then always remember, it's a numbers game. If you ask out enough women, you'll get a date. There's all kinds of things that most people do. First of all, most people are very short-term thinkers. They're not long-term thinkers. Most people are much too practical thinking. They think about, what are they going to have for dinner? It's very content-oriented rather than conceptual. They're not good conceptual thinkers. They don't think in terms of abstract concepts. Most people are linear thinkers. They think of one thing at a time. My old Zen teacher used to say that character is a question of how many things can you hold in your head at the same time and still act upon them all intelligently. And as you rise up the ladder, for example, as an executive or a leader, there's a million things going on at one time. You got to hold all these things in your head at the same time and still be able to parse them and make good decisions. Another thing that people don't do, and they should do, is concentrate fanatically on becoming better decision makers. And that starts by studying the decision-making process itself. It's introspection. How am I making my decisions? Do I make mostly good decisions? Do I make mostly bad decisions? Then you start to track your decisions and you say, hey, I'm a salesman. I make a decision. If I say X, Y, and Z, this guy's going to buy. Okay, he say X, Y, and Z and he doesn't buy. This does not compute. What did I do wrong? What assumptions were built into this? Life is one long series of decision making. Every decision is a prediction of the future. So every decision that you make, I predict that if I pet this dog, he's not going to bite me. And you pet the dog and he bites you, that was a bad decision. But it's always a prediction. What assumptions did I build into this? That's all that's going on. Most people don't realize this. And decision making is like baseball. You don't have to bat 1,000. The people whose lives work, who make whatever it is, make money, make the best relationship decisions, they're all people who on average make a lot more good decisions than bad decisions. So become fanatically focused on your own decision-making process. Learn how you're making decisions. Do you do it emotionally? Do you do it erratically? Do you do it instinctively? Are you making decisions based on what your dad told you? Are you making decisions based on what everybody else is doing? How are your decisions being made? Well, Richard Rose, it was a fanatic, it was a wild man Zen teacher, West Virginia hillbilly, which, I put a plug for my book. If you want to learn a lot about him, read my book, Not Less Than Everything. But anyway, he liked to bitch. He used to bitch a lot, And one of the things he bitched about, which, because people would come to him all the time for mentoring, but then he wouldn't take his advice. He'd say, people always say, Christ, everybody's always asking me for the idea of advice, and I never take my advice. I never do what I tell them to do, So I finally worked up the courage, and I went in to see him, and I was in his kitchen. I said, Mr. Rose, I said, whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it. And he looked, he said, anything? And I said, yeah, anything. Now I'm saying, what the heck am I getting into here? And I think I asked for my firstborn child. He said, anything? He said it twice. And I said, I was really scared. And I said, okay. And he said, all right, learn to think for yourself. And it blew my mind. It blows my mind to this day because on the one hand, it's a very concrete, specific answer. It's convergent. It's this and not anything else. On the other hand, it explodes into divergency because just exactly what does it mean to think for yourself, and how does one learn to think for oneself, and how does one know when one's thinking for oneself? And oh my God, he just gave me a lifetime's problem, which he did. Oh my goodness. Struggle is everything. What people forget, and you think about this hard, and if I'm wrong, right, comment and tell me I'm wrong. There is no meaning without sacrifice. Sacrifice, which is just another form of struggle, is what injects meaning into your life. It's the things we sacrifice for that we care about. It's the things we're willing to sacrifice, things that we value. And if you're not sacrificing for anything, I guarantee you're depressed. And one of the things that is sad about our society is that so much is given to people today. I mean, I think when I was growing up, and I grew up, we thought we were middle class, but by today's standards, we were dirt poor. And when I went to prep school, I heard about some of my classmates going to Vail skiing for Christmas vacation. Oh my God. I mean, they might as well have been going to Mars. They might as well have been going to Mars, Alpha Centauri. It was so far out of my realm of being able to imagination. My idea of a vacation was going to spend a week with my cousin across town in Pittsburgh. And now I look at my nephews and nieces, they've all been to Vail skiing. Almost every kid I know, even kids that are around here that are living in trailer parks, seem to have gone to Disneyland, And then, you find that it's just everything is just given and there's no meaning. And then you find out that 40% of college freshmen are on antidepressants already. World Health Organization says depression is the number one illness afflicting Western civilization. And it's because people don't have anything worth, they feel like they don't have anything worth sacrificing for anymore.
When you were working with Rose, what were some of the struggles and sacrifices that you had to do?
Well, one of the number one sacrifices is Rose was a big believer in celibacy. When you're 20 years old and 21 years old trying to be celibate, believe me, it's a struggle. Another big struggle was that I ended up, and he didn't force me to do this, but he was very much a believer that if you're going to, and I believe it too, that if you're going to be great, if you're going to do anything, then if it's worth doing, then it's worth doing all in. The scariest thing in the world is compromise, because you end up compromising and then you end up sacrificing just enough to make yourself miserable, but you didn't sacrifice enough to be successful. So then you end up with all these doubts that if I'd given a little more, do you think I could have made the big leagues? I even had, a golf pro of mine who did make the PGA Tour, for example, but he smoked too much pot. He's just racked with guilt. And maybe if I didn't smoke that pot. I dropped out of college and threw myself hook, line, and sinker into this Zen stuff and became a carpet installer. And one of the huge struggles that I had to go through was that I felt like the entire world was against me. From the outside world, I never got positive reinforcement. Whether it was my family, whether it was my friends, whether it was people I met in a bar. I didn't go to bars, but because I wasn't drinking, I wasn't smoking, I wasn't, But wherever I went, it was, you're wasting your life. What are you doing? What's all this stuff? You have so much to offer. And believe me, when you're laying in bed at night, those thoughts come back to you. Are they right? Are they right? Can everybody be wrong? Can I be right and everybody else be wrong? Everybody else is getting on with their life. Everybody else is getting married. Everybody else is getting laid. Everybody else is making money. Everybody else is going skiing in Vail. And you're laying carpet for a living when everybody, you went to prep school and you did this and that and the other thing. And, here you are living out of the back of a truck or living in the back of an ice cream parlor making minimum wage trying to learn how to lay carpet. And this, it was all struggle. But that was what made it meaningful, and that's what made it something I wouldn't trade now for $1 billion. It made me the person that I am because it was the cauldron. Most people want to believe that spirituality is a system of beliefs. You start talking spirituality with 99% of the people, they'll tell you they're 5 or 6. I believe God is love, and I believe this, and I believe that we're all going to go to heaven or we're all going to go to hell or whatever, and that's it. It's just beliefs. No, that's not it at all. It's a static model. Spirituality is the word Israel means he who wrestles with God. The Jews didn't say they're the children of Abraham. They didn't say they're the children of Isaac. They're not the children of Moses. They're the children of Israel. Jacob took the word Israel. He who wrestles with God. You're supposed to wrestle with life. I remember Rose even said to me one time when it was as a criticism, he said, I know you're dedicated, he said, but you really got to learn how to wrestle with yourself more. You really got to wrestle with yourself. And that's everything. What you should focus on is your mission. And you need to have a mission that is the highest thing you can conceive of. to me, the highest thing as a spiritual mission, the highest thing you can conceive of, and whether it's get to heaven or find out who you really are. I like that definition of spirituality, by the way, to find out who you really are. But anyway, so you need a mission. Things are not important at all. You need a certain amount of, Mr. Rose used to call it dollar grease. You got to eat. But the most important thing in achieving your mission or living out your mission, because a mission is something you typically don't achieve, you live it out, is the people. Having the right kind of people and putting the energy in. It's kind of like in golf. You always want to play somebody who's a little bit better than you are in golf. You always want to work out at the gym with somebody that's a little bit stronger than you are. Somebody that's going to push you. So you always want some people around you that are a little bit better than you are. Which means, by the way, that means you got to work on yourself to be a secure human being. It's unbelievable how many people, much lost opportunity is because insecure people are so easily threatened by stronger people, by better people. I had a guy interviewing with me one time, and I said, "What do you want? He said, "I want your job." "That's what I want. I'm going to take your job." And I said, "You're hired." I said, "The only way you're getting my job is you're going to push me up to a bigger job." You're not going to threaten me. I wasn't threatened by that. But I saw it so much in business that people are so easily threatened. So you got to have really good people around you, which is the most important thing you can have in life. You got to be the kind of person that people want to be around, and not somebody that's insecure and threatened by strong people. If you don't sacrifice now, there probably ain't going to be no later. One of the cardinal sins of everything in life is procrastination. If you become a procrastinator because you're putting off the sacrifice, usually you never do it. It never gets done. Yeah, you'll get pain later, just pure pain that won't have any value because the pain will be, oh my God, 20 years has gone by and I still haven't planted that tree I was going to plant. And it's really, really tough to face that. That is one of the most important things. If it's worth doing, you do it now. And one of my biggest things that I was always doing in business is I just pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone. As soon as you think about it, just pick up the phone and do it and knock it out. Get it done. One of my business partners, who was a very, very successful entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur. And so I said, "Ray," I said, you've got 5 different companies and everything. I said, what's your job there? What do you do most of the time? He said, I'll tell you, Augie, he said, most of what I do is run around all day long breaking up meetings. I jump in there and I scream, "Don't just sit there trying to figure it out. Get off your asses, get out there and find out." I love that. Don't figure it out, find out. Don't figure it out, find out. Do it right now. You get in the habit of doing that. I remember one time it was one of my spiritual groups, and we were going to have a retreat. It was for college students. We were going to have them write some kind of an essay. I was a subscriber to a magazine called Spiritual Life, just a small magazine out of Greensboro, North Carolina or something, but I enjoyed it. And I said, "You know what?" I said, maybe we could contact them and we could say, as part of the prize, if you have the best essay or whatever, we'll see if Spiritual Life will publish your essay, So they had a committee meeting that was meeting. So a month later, I walked out and they were meeting, and I said, "Whatever happened to that idea about Spiritual Life?" And the guy who was chairing the meeting said, "Well, we put it on the list, and then it went to this committee, and then the committee kicked it to this other list, on and on." I said, "All right." I walked back they were holding the meetings at my offices. I walked back into my office. I reached up pulled down on one of my Spiritual Life magazines, opened to the first page. There was a phone number. I called the phone number, asked for the editor. He got on the phone. I told him the idea. 10 minutes later, he said, "Sure, we'll do it." I walked back. I said, "It's done! It's done!" I don't like Nike's "just do it" because it doesn't have a moral component to it. Just do what? But yeah, a lot of times that's all it really takes is just do it. When I first started my company, we had no money. We had started on $2,000, and we desperately needed leads, and we had very little money to spend on getting leads. And it was a very, very technical business. It was software developers' tools. I didn't know anything about software development tools. I knew nothing about software development. So what I did was I found a couple of magazines that had all the software developers that they subscribed to. And I looked at the advertiser index to all the people that were selling to software developers, and I called every single one of those companies up, and I asked for the vice president of marketing. And when I got him on the phone, I said, "I'm starting this company, we're doing this and X, and we're not in competition with you, but we don't have any money. Can you help me, tell me what works, what doesn't work, where's the best way to spend my money?" Oh my God, these guys saved me millions of dollars. One guy I remember saying, "I don't feel comfortable with this conversation," he said to me. I said, "Okay," and we hung up. But another 90 or whatever gave me an education worth $1 million, and I got it in a week. Trial and error. Meanwhile, the vast majority of people would have spent the next 2 years trial and error. The vast majority just don't want to talk to people. They don't want to. They don't want to deal with people. And they'd much rather spend days on the internet or days of trial and error, creating mail pieces and sending them out and seeing which ones work, and months and thousands and millions of dollars, When a telephone call, you just ask somebody who's already done it. And 99 times out of 100, they'll help you out. They'll share with you, Especially if you say, oh, how can I do something for you, Make a friend. People don't want to do it. But it's incredibly important to success. Hard work. Obviously, talent plus hard work is the hard work is going to beat out talent if it's all it is. There's tons and tons of examples of people that have all kinds of talent who just never. I had a cousin, for example, who was blisteringly fast. He could run a 10-second 100-yard dash, and all during high school he was an incredible halfback or running back for his football team. And he went to college and he completely blew out. He didn't have the work ethic. And when he got to college, everybody was fast. And he didn't know how to fall back on his work ethic to be able to, and so he blew out. There's so many stories like that. I mean, the most important thing you can possibly have to be successful is determination. Stubbornness. That's stubborn. And that was one of the things Lou Mobley identified that great leaders have. It's this stubbornness. It's this attitude that all you got to do is tell them it can't be done. And their first instinct is, yeah, watch me. And then they have this stubborn, put your teeth into it and just keep going. I mean, when we started our company, we had nothing. And for 3 years, I didn't pay myself a nickel. For 3 years, I didn't make any money. And we just kept plodding and plodding. And there were so many times when it just seemed like it was hopeless. I remember one of my partners came in, and one of the nicest compliments I ever got, he said, I get discouraged times, he said. But he said, then I look at you and I said, there's one determined son of a bitch. And if he can hang in there, then I can hang in there. Richard Rose used to say that you keep at stuff until you forget how to quit. Till you forget how to quit. And that's what training and character does for you. It's nothing you can do intellectually. It's not a willpower thing. It's not where you just build yourself into this machine that doesn't know how to quit. But of course, I have to throw in, but you also have to have the wisdom to be able to know when you're drilling a dry hole and it's time to try something else. I found that out, by the way, the hard way. Back when I was working with Louis Mobley, I fell in love with a waitress at this bar where he used to hang out. Her name was Vicky. And Richard Rose always said that if you want something bad enough, you'll get it. So I became obsessed with, I was going to get this girl to go out with me, And so I was traveling a lot at the time, so I was always sending teddy bears to her from different cities at the bar where she was working, And so one day I came into the bar in the afternoon, there was nobody there, and she called me over and we sat down at a table, and she looked at me and she said, "Stop sending me teddy bears. I am not going out with you today or tomorrow or ever. Stop sending me teddy bears." And so I walked away and I thought, oh my God, what? This does not compute. Rose said that if you want something and you're determined and you're stubborn and you don't know how to quit, that you'll get it. Well, it's obvious I ain't never getting this girl, And then suddenly so I thought about it, then I had an epiphany. And I said, no, Rose was talking about a probability. He's not saying you're going to get this girl. He's saying you're going to get a girl. Determination is a probability. Sales is a great example. You don't know who's going to buy. You just know that if you keep hammering, somebody's going to buy. I would say the biggest obstacle that we have to face in life, especially on a spiritual path, is self-deception. We're all scared. We're all fundamentally insecure. We all know we're going to die someday. And so we create this, the word persona itself, that comes from Latin, it means mask. So personality, your whole personality is a mask. And it's extremely hard to see it in yourself. One of the scariest things you can do is live your whole life based on self-deception. You spend your entire life climbing a ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong tree. In my experience, there's only one way to rid yourself of self-deception. It's very hard to do it on your own. I mean, experience will, if you open your eyes, when you keep bumping your head into something, but that's the hardest way to do it. The best way to do it is to surround yourself with people that tell you the truth, because they have the objectivity that you don't have. And again, mentors, having teachers, and giving the teacher the permission to tell you the tough truths about yourself that you really don't want to hear. I remember Rose telling me when I was one day in front of a whole bunch of people too, by the way, when I was first working with him, he told me I was an emotional person. Oh, I wanted to go out and hang myself, because I had this self-image, because I'd read all these books, and I had this self-image of myself as this hardcore intellectual who's reasonable and rational and all, and Rose says, I'm a completely emotional person, and I was shocked and appalled, I wanted to strangle him and everything. He was absolutely right. I'm an emotional person, no question about it. I'm a romantic. I wanted to live a life like a superhero, and I still do. I still want to live a mythological hero's life, And thank God, I'm very thankful to it. I have no problem with being emotional. But at that point in my life, it was a real insult. If you play the stock market, and I don't like the idea of you an investor, there's always a correlation between the amount of risk you're going to take and the amount of rewards you're going to get. There's a thing, I haven't heard of it lately, but they called it a Mongolian hedge. Mongolian hedge is when you bought the exact same stock that you sold. So in other words, you can't lose any money, you can't make any money, but you're still going to lose some money because there's a friction opportunity cost. There's always a correlation between risk and reward. And so it depends on what, it depends again, it always comes back to your mission. What do you want out of life? The higher you aim, the more risks you're going to have to take. On the other hand, there's no reason to be foolhardy. So it's kind of like Aristotle's golden mean. It's always, you got to do this, but then again, don't forget to do that. We just talked about being stubborn. You want to be determined, but not stubborn. You don't want to be risk adverse, but you don't want to be foolhardy. So it's always on a continuum. If you want an adventure, there has to be real risk. A roller coaster is a thrill. It's not an adventure. Because, barring the fact that the roller coaster could collapse under you, but no, it's safe. It's 99.9999%, you're going to survive the roller coaster ride without any ill effects. So there's no real risk involved. So it's a thrill. It's not an adventure. If you want your life to be an adventure, and that's what I wanted more than anything else, I wanted my life to be an adventure, then you got to take risks, real risks. There's got to be something at stake. I remember when I first won the Templeton Prize, and it was some woman from this big publishing house. And she said, well, if you're going to write a book, do a book proposal, she said, what we're going to want to know is what's at stake? What's at stake? And to me, this is what I want to know when you talk to me about your spiritual path, or if you talk to me about your life goals, or you talk to me about your mission, or whatever you want to talk about, the big picture of your life, any person that I meet. If there's nothing at stake, then it's going to be a boring story. It's not going to teach me anything. So what's at stake? What's really the risk here? And I talk a lot about in my book that a big epiphany that I had was when I broke up with my girlfriend when I was 21. I was madly in love with this girl, Sarah, and I realized that I was either going to do this spiritual thing or I was going to marry her. I couldn't do both because I'd be self-deception. I'd be kidding myself. Every time I was being a really good husband and father, I'd be feeling like I ought to be at the monastery. And every time I was at the monastery, I'd be feeling like I should be home with my kid. I knew it would just tear me up. So I broke up with her, and then suddenly I had this incredible, because even, being celibate or being a vegetarian or meditating for, doing all the other disciplines I was doing, all of those were retrievable. All of those, I could, tomorrow I'll just start eating meat. Or tomorrow I'll go get a girl. You can always go back. But now she was gone. And now I'd given up the love of my life for this path. And I knew that the scariest thing that could happen to me now is if I didn't throw myself completely into my spiritual path, I might lose both. I might lose my spiritual objectives and lose her. So by putting something at risk, by making that sacrifice, it lit a much bigger fire under my bottom. The more we sacrifice and the more risks we take, then the more fire is in it. That's why if you look in business, you go to a venture capitalist, let's say you have an idea for a company, and you go to a venture capitalist and you want $100 million because it's a really big idea. And he's going to give you $100 million to start this company. He's also going to want you to take another mortgage out on your house. He wants a couple $100,000 out of you. $100 million from him, but he's going to want a couple $100,000. Why? Because he wants you to have, blood in the game. He wants you to have some sweat in it. He wants you to have some fear. And that's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it fun.